So, foremost, you can introduce yourself, your name, gender pronouns, what do you do, and checking question is if you could be any Filipino food that describes your personality.
Everyone, my name is Meldrick. I'm 21 years old. I'm from Hawaii. I'm in my last year studying public health and Philippine language and literature. And if I were to be any Filipino food presents my personality, I would say banana lumpia. Just because I'm rough on the surface but soft on the inside.
My name is Olive. I am 36, hailing from San Diego, Kumeyaay territory. I am a massage therapist, and food wise, I think I would say halo halo. I'm a mixture. I have different sets of groups that I would say different toppings that add on to my life. And I just love the sweetness that they do bring within, within that aspect. So I guess I'm a halo halo.
My gosh, hi everyone. I just want to say it's really an honor. It's really nice to be here, sharing space with you all virtually. I'm Marianne. I use they them pronouns. I'm 20 years old and I'm currently a second year undergraduate at the University of Washington Tacoma. I'm currently located in Federal Way, Washington. Um, and I guess, oh yeah, Filipino food. To describe myself, I wish I had more time to think about this, but like, I guess I'll just say this just because like it's literally like downstairs in my kitchen and I'm ready to destroy it after this. But I would say nilaga. Like nilaga is like my absolute like favorite like Filipino food like in the world. Like I will protect nilaga with all my life. I just think it's just because like I feel like I'm more of a savory person. Like I know y'all said sweet. I like sweet too. But like I'm more of a savory person and like since it's like a stew, like it's like similar to sinigang but without like the sampalok. Like I don't know, I feel like what's so cool about nilaga is just like you can add like lots of toppings like in it, like corn and like the bok choy in it. Like it's like so good. Like I'm such a soup person. So yeah, I would say nilaga.
So really diverse and diverse answers, especially in a diverse group. I love it, honestly. Like I know I said I love it a lot, but I can't wait. I asked this as a checking question because when I think about like food and our personalities, I feel like they go hand in hand. So, and with this kwentuhan, I feel like it's gonna a little bit go hand in hand with.
It was a mental health issue because I would consider myself a 1.5 migrant, right? I was born and raised in the Philippines and migrated here in the States at the age of 10. So I kind of grew up in that kind of culture of just pray for everything, right? And so I kind of had a breakdown. I remember it was like early year, like maybe a year or two into college. I had like body image issues, and at the time, I ended up like dropping all my classes. Um, and then if it was surprisingly, it was my dad who actually kind of tried to console me and say like, back in college, I also had, and there was a time where I felt like I couldn't move forward with my classes, right? And I thought that was kind of surprising, but I didn't know, and I didn't have a label or a name for it, and that was like 10 years plus ago, right? Um, but it wasn't until like really in like late 20s to like late 20s on to that I kind of realized like, okay, like this is really what what the label is mental health. So that's kind of, I guess, where my journey started. Is one, I got into activism world here in San Diego, right, and advocate for like women and children. And but then because I was in that realm of activism where you just, it's a voluntary work, but it become a little bit toxic when you don't take care of yourself. Um, so then after kind of when I took rest from that space, then I realized how important it really was and how critical it was to take time for myself. Even though it's cliche to say you can't give from an empty cup, it literally was, because I was exhausted. Like, I like things, other parts of my life was, getting affected, school, like personal, and also relationships. So that's kind of like where it started for me in terms of my mental health journey.
I just wanted to add on to what you said about body image, because that hits home for me in so many places. I guess since, I think as far back as the 7th grade, like I was like what, 11, 12 years old, that was when I really started having, body image issues. It's been a journey, and it's still something that I'm still struggling with now as like a 20-year-old. And yeah, especially in like, that's so prevalent in Filipino culture. It's just this paradox. You know how like, at parties, that like the relatives and like your parents say, oh, eat more, but then you're telling, like, you're fat shaming me like behind closed doors. Like, what? That just doesn't make any sense to me. But I guess that's just how it's been. But we need to dismantle that somehow, because that's obviously a problem. But yeah, aside from body image issues, I actually, as like a college student, like for some of us in here, or even like post grads, college is stressful. Yeah, just like, higher education, like there's so many things I can unpack about the education system, but just, yeah, the life of a college student is just like, it's obviously stressful. You have to like, again, focus on being a full-time student, or even part-time too. It depends. But also there's like extracurricular activities. There's so many things to be involved in, finding your communities and all sorts of stuff, finding yourself, your identity. There's so many things to really unpack and really further discover more about like yourself in college, or even just like in your 20s in general. Like I recently just started entering it, so whoa, adulting, that's scary. Not ready for that. But yeah, it was only until like this quarter, winter quarter, it was like week 4, like week 5, I really started advocating for my mental health. And I think it only just started like, or how would I say this? Just, it's been starting since fall quarter. I just learned that like I have really like bad high functioning anxiety, and it's currently acting up right now, especially because I have finals. I have a type A personality. Like I'm very like, I don't know, goal driven, accomplishments driven, and that instead of like, with high functioning anxiety, someone living with it, like I didn't know it was a thing until like social media pointed out, which is like, whoa, the internet, I'm learning new things about myself, and I also in addition, I'm doing counseling right now, like through my school university counseling. So that's been cool. I've just been learning so many things about myself, and just having, Thursday afternoons at 2 p.m. crying sessions. So that's awesome as well. But yeah, high functioning anxiety, I feel like is like, like with, and I'm actually sorry, I get off track really easily, but yeah, basically compared to like generalized, or I feel like normal anxiety, where it sort of prevents you from doing, functioning daily activities. As someone with high functioning anxiety, it actually pushes you forward to do things, because on the outside, it looks like I'm doing okay, but on the inside, there's so many things going through my mind. Like I overthink things, I stress out. I like literally my anxiety pushes me to just, again, do so many things. And I didn't know it was like an actual type of, anxiety thing until like, I'm like since college, like when I only recently found out about it.
Yes, for me, my mental health journey really started uh, at the start of the pandemic. So last year, a lot of things were highlighted, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, just working toward just learning more about my past, um, my past experiences, how they've influenced me. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I've gone through like a lot of hard stuff in my life, but um, yeah, it's just learning about what these things are, these experiences, and label to it actually helps a lot.
Thank you everyone for sharing. And I think I know that this question is kind of like serious, kind of heavy, and like if you don't kind of feel called to share, by all means, it's okay. I deeply, deeply affirm you. So and going going back to what Marianne, Meldrick, and what Manang Olive said. Sorry, on the chat I said like Olaf. I was thinking Olaf like warm hugs. But I know you both highlighted the key thing is body image, especially in our culture that's really prevalent today. And I kind of wanted to start continue on with how did you understand with your Filipinx culture, Filipinx culture and identity?
So I guess in that sense, for me as a 1.5 migrant, you know, it's just a funny story that we kind of recently brought up with my family. It's like when before we migrated here, like literally my parents were like, "We're gonna make a sandwich. This is all you're gonna be eating." When we moved to America, right? But little did we know, San Diego, it's like a huge hub where Pinoys and Pinais or Filipinx are, which I'm lucky to grow up in, right? So I guess I still have friends. I'm still connected with friends and family back home. So I still have that kind of bridge between those two worlds. But yet I still grew up majority, of my life here. Um, but in terms of how do I understand my Philippine X and culture and identity, I guess in some way it's a privilege to be able to speak my native tongue, which is Tagalog. I understand a little bit of Ilocano on my mom's side. Um, so growing up within my household and speaking my native tongue is um it's something that I hold dear in terms of having that connection within my family and have in the work that I do in terms of like doing massage like with my uncles and my aunts or like family, like I can naturally just communicate better in that regards. um but it's also very complex and layered in terms of what does it mean to be a Filipina here in the US, and how do we there's just a lot of I guess complexity and layers in terms of where I kind of position myself, but in a way, um, but I think for me, it's understanding it in a way that I just know I just following through with my passion. I didn't become a massage therapist until like literally just last year, right? I was in this right out of high school. I thought like I'm going to be a nurse, right? And then I got into activism, but yet that didn't feel right for me. So in terms of nursing, so I got into activism and did like other jobs, and just recently um really stopped working my corporate job for 11 years. And I told my husband, my partner, that I wasn't always going to be here forever. But it wasn't until last year did I really follow through with my passion and just say, like, this is it. Like, this is my calling. Is culturally wise, I've always felt like I had the gift of hilot because I grew up with that with my dad. So that's basically like massage, like that's what they use back home in the Philippines for those that don't know. And I went on a meditation, and I get affirmation that this is your calling, this is what your path is. So in some ways that's kind of me showing up for myself and following through with my passion. And also kind of connecting within my culture, like especially with my dad, and kind of learning more about what it meant for my family back home to have these type of gifts as well, right? Because I was gifted spiritually as a kid, but I kind of turned that off um when we moved here. Because the one we in the Philippines, it's common to like see spirits or talk about ghosts or talk about entities, but then like it's not guided. So when I moved here in the in the States, I was just like, well, okay, like no one talks about it here, so I'm just gonna like switch it off, right? So if that makes sense. So it wasn't until I really worked on myself spiritually through like the different experiences that I really start really opening up to what that means for me as a Filipina, identifying within like my culture, and also kind of just being brave enough to bring that forward to say this is what you're going to do, just follow through with your passion, like, and see kind of where that takes you. So that's kind of where I'm currently at.
I like that you really put emphasis on just the language and you hold it dear to your heart. For me, I understand my Filipino culture and my identity. It wasn't until I actually enrolled into the Filipino program at UH did I really get to understand and come to terms with who I am culturally. It's because beforehand in high school and all that, there was a lot of prejudice against just and a lot of just silencing of who you are like culturally because Filipinos, you're fa, blah blah blah, or at least that's how it is in Hawaii. So yeah, but I'm not really. I was born in Hawaii, so I'm not really. I wasn't really like targeted as being fob. So um, but there was that stuff like ringing in my head. But yeah. So we had a lot of cultural events happening, just connecting with other Filipinos, and then also just learning the language. So I'm fortunate enough to be able to speak and understand Ilocano and Tagalog. So that really helped me come to terms, like really understand my culture. Being able to speak at home with my family and my relatives is also pretty good. What else? Yeah, I'm not too sure what else to add.
It's just to a little bit like add along with what Meldrick said because we're both from Hawaii, so we kind of experience like the same thing. Like we see the label of being, or I grew up hearing the word fob a lot, especially for those immigrants who would come to Hawaii, and I would witness them being like getting marginalized and stuff. But I think today it's getting better.
To be honest, I get I feel like I'm better at listening than speaking because I just feel self-conscious whenever if I'm taking up too much space or if I'm oversharing and stuff. So like I would I guess yeah, I just don't want to take up space or like feel like I'm over talking over anyone. Just let me know. Yeah, because I just don't know how far back I can go, I guess, in terms of I guess I mean, we'll just be transparent here. How did I come to understand my Filipinx culture and identity? Um, so right now I live in Washington State, but I was born and raised in Alaska, specifically Kodiak, uh, for about like four. I was living there until I was 14, and then I moved to Washington like November 2014. But I guess just a bit more context. So I guess like population demographics wise, where I lived in Alaska, it was a really interesting dynamic just because I I felt like half the time I was living with people that looked like me, but then the other half was like I wasn't really. Because if I could describe the demographic and like the diversity, it would be like 50% white, 45% Filipino, and then 5% other. So it was just really interesting because, you know, it was like a small town on an island in Alaska, and I was surrounded by people that most often like looked like me, fellow, you know, Philams and stuff. And and again, small town, so everyone kind of knew everybody. It was like that kind of culture. My parents knew everyone's Filipino parents and stuff. If they said something, oh, do you know like this person's parents? Like, yeah, like we know everyone. And um yeah, I guess I knew at that time my extent of like my culture and identity. I knew I was Filipino. I was just very, I guess, how would you say it? I was pretty immune to it. Like I knew who I was surrounded by, but bringing more consciousness and awareness of being Filipino and the importance of it, what the meaning of being Filipino was, especially like, you know, in the diaspora in the States, didn't really come forth until I moved to Washington. Because my parents or like my I can't speak English. My my family and I, we moved to Washington just because like living in Alaska, again, I feel like similar to those like living in Hawaii, like when you're like outside of the lower 48, like everything is expensive, like living is expensive. Um so we decided to again like be a part of the lower 48 and move to Washington, just because my family really thought we could have a better life here. Living would be a bit more manageable and cheaper, you know, more opportunities, which honestly has been. I felt like if I was still living in Alaska, I think I wouldn't be the person I am today with the experiences that I've had from living here in Washington. But yeah, just moving forward, um, my consciousness of my culture and identity, it didn't really come until I guess when I started, what was it? Because I moved when I was in like the middle of 8th grade. Um, so I didn't, it was like a whole different demographic shift from like Alaska going to Washington, because in Washington, like it was like a culture shock moment for me, because I didn't realize, you know, how culturally and ethnically diverse like like there were different populations in the states that I didn't knew existed. Um, so yeah, it was really cool in that sense. But like when I went to middle school, I remember my first day, I remember feeling a bit more, I don't know if this is the best word, but like I felt a bit alienated, I guess, just because I've never seen like again so many different groups of people. Like there, like living in Alaska, there wasn't many Black people, and so when I saw like a whole bunch of them, like in my middle school, for example, I was like, whoa, like I didn't know there were these many people here. It was like culture shock to me, and then not finding immediately many like Filipinos like in the middle school I went to, it felt a bit isolating, you know, simultaneously. Um, but yeah, I guess like high school was like all right. I'd say that like, there was a bit more Filipinos than in middle school, but then more of my consciousness and my awareness of like Filipino culture and identity didn't really start until I entered college, which I'm so glad to like, you know, it's a privilege, you know, and I wish it wasn't a privilege to attend like a higher education institution. Like I believe that education is a right for everyone. It should be an instilled right, a human right. But just at the moment, like politically, you know, it's a privilege apparently, unfortunately. Um, but at the same time, you know, um, yeah, just in college, having the opportunity to pursue higher education, you get to expose yourself to a lot of different things, different communities and such. Like you have the opportunity to really, again, find yourself, like as I was talking about earlier. And so I found out that there was like a Filipino like club or RSO on my university campus, and so that was when my again my awareness and my education really stemmed from there. Just attending like those meetings, like those club meetings, being surrounded by like, you know, your community, like, you know, the kind of people, the culture that you're familiar with, that these people are connected to you through. Um, that was like so empowering to me, because like I remember trying to attempt like or create like a Filipino club in high school, but I guess like there just like again wasn't a lot of people at the time, so it wasn't as like successful as like in college, because it's really popular nowadays, like in the States at least. Like I know there's so many Filipino clubs like in different colleges and universities across the states, so they have their own sort of Filipino club, which is really cool. Student organizing is really, it's really apparent and strong, especially like in Washington at least. um yeah, in like the Pacific Northwest. um yeah, I gained more consciousness of like my Filipino identity and culture really just through immersing myself in these Filipino spaces. Like aside, I'm not as active in FOSA, which is like my university's uh, yeah, club, Filipino club. But I'm more active nowadays in my Filipinx sisterhood organization, Pi Nu Iota. Yeah, just surrounded by really like strong Filipinx women or whatever, has been like the most life-changing moment of my life, especially in like my college experience, because when you're a college student, at least when you're starting out, you get lonely. Like, who do you find for your people out here? Like, sure. Um, but yeah, oh my gosh, I don't, oh, again, oversharing. But yeah, immersing myself in like all these different spaces. I also am like a community organizer in like this one organization, Anak Bayan, where I really got to learn more about like the revolutionary history of like the Philippines and stuff, and a lot of the very like significant problems politically that are happening like in like back home in the Philippines, you know, like capitalism, imperialism, feudalism, like all that stuff. Like it's really empowered me to really you know, fight for the rights and welfare of our people, of our kababayan. So that's made me really proud, and it has shaped my identity and like my culture and understanding of being Filipino. Um, but yeah, just immerse yourself in those spaces, because that's been like the biggest like significant thing that's happened like in my college experience. And I see myself um yeah, pursuing these spaces and being a part of them, like, you know, in the near future, whatever that may be. But yeah.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you for sharing. Especially like what everyone else also shared out is like how we got to know our culture and identity is through college, and also like our community, our surroundings. So from back then, from now, I think it's kind of like to the point where we see our culture, our community being lifted up as as much that there's actually now more role models to like look at, especially in terms of the Filipino mass media and representation. And because I know that this topic can get a little bit intenseful, maybe a little bit share of like what values have we grown up with, and how did it shape in understanding ourselves, especially. And when I mean values, like Filipino values, such as like the values that you grew up with within your family that made you who you are today, and that kind of.
So I guess I would say the value of like working hard, right? And also I'm very fortunate to have parents that did not enforce um, who and what we should be in society, right? They didn't force me into like get into nursing, or like, you know, the stereotypical things that like, you know, other parents may be imposing on their parent on their kids. So I'm lucky to have that. So I think but I think besides like being a hard worker, it's just giving back to the community. And what does that look like moving forward, right? Like growing up, we, you know, we would visit a specific orphanage that my dad back home in the Philippines anyways, that because, you know, they worked at the base, and that's how we migrated here. So there's just being showing kindness really and compassion to everyone around you, and really shows your character as a person, right? And how you interact with others, um it pretty much shows like who you are. So I think those type of values for me is just like be respectful of others, and also be respectful of the space and that you're kind of taking up within the community. So I think that's what I would say, the values that I grew up with, that I still try to um, continue to follow through and show up in within the community.
I have very similar values. For my family, we, for one, yeah, being humble. So, no matter how much money we have, though we don't have that much, we just be humble. Sometimes that humbleness kind of backfires where you don't ask for help, which is a problem I see within our own community. So, yeah, I've also struggled with that, asking for help. But as I've kind of grew up and like started being more independent, I've learned how to ask for help. It's really not that bad. And sometimes just peeling off the layers of being humble, sometimes it helps. Another one would be, or another value would be being hardworking, like as you mentioned, just work hard. Um, and my family also really put an emphasis on education. So they want all of us to obtain our bachelor's degree or go to college, just because they didn't really have the opportunity. So they're taking a risk on they're taking a risk on us, hoping that we'll do something with our lives, hopefully, which I think we are. Also, just giving back to our community, I feel like that it's also really ingrained within Hawaii culture. So there's a lot of like overlap. Yeah, what else? Being compassionate, being like understanding people from their point of view. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, those three things.
Like the same thing. You know what what everyone has said. Um yeah, I think I resonate exactly like with what everyone's saying, especially about like the hardworking part, the emphasis on education. And I was always taught like especially uh by my mom. By my mom. Love that queen. Love hate relationship, but mostly love. Um, that education is power, and when you and here's the thing too, like I I didn't really. I mean, I've had a brief understanding of it, but then it wasn't until college when I really depended and like really needed the support of my mom, which I'm really grateful like to be, living at home and stuff like during like college cuz save your money, but also just for that that emotional support, that like parents can give, especially mothers cuz they're like the most badass people in the world. But I learned, I guess, like before I really depended like on my mom like for support, like in college now. I guess like when I was younger, especially like in high school, I knew that education was important, but and I thought my mom's reason for always like putting emphasis on education was just so again you can get the degree, get the job, get a really good job to help support your family. Like that's what I really thought. Oh, bless you, Chachie. But that's what that was like my limited point of view of what again the whole push of education was on me. But then now in college, I learned that from my mom. She said like all those times that like she's like motivated and like encouraged me and like my two brothers, to pursue like education was just so we can be proud of ourselves for something that like we did that work, we put in the work just so like it's something to be proud of so that nobody will tell you otherwise, will like discriminate you or like make you feel inferior when really you're not, because you worked for this, you worked for this title, this, even if it's just a piece of paper, because capitalism. But we still did that. We put in the work, we put blood, sweat, and tears. We got we got anxiety, we have mental health issues like during the time of attaining this degree, this rightful title to have. um but yeah, that's like, yeah, definitely like, again, hardworking in education, they just hit home, they resonate a lot, and has always been pushed in, well, not pushed, but like encouraged, in my family.
Yes, I love everything that you're saying, Marianne. Like you have a really powerful voice, especially with the age you are now. Actually, because I know Manang Ola have to leave in a few seconds, and she's actually one of the oldest in this group. I actually wanted to do it a little different within the mental health Kuntuhan, which is giving a little advice from us as Gen Zers from a millennial perspective, especially when it comes to our community and our space. Sometimes we kind of now have a glimpse of what's been happening now, and like a little bit like an advice to us Gen Zers from a millennial. And then oh, I see you.
Me too.
Sorry, us young folks, but I don't know. But advice in general, because you were once in our shoes, and we will be in your shoes one day, and
I'd say like even from our standpoint in the age that I'm in, there's always something to learn, right? No matter the age gap, I think even the younger generation has a lot more to give and also to teach us, right? Like with what you're doing, Chachi and Meldrick and Marianne, in terms of what you're standing for within the community. I feel like there's even a lot more volume, right, with what you're doing and what you're showing up. So I think with that is just be you, be authentically you, find the community that will help support you and guide you. Boundaries is always going to be a big thing, right, within ourselves and what that looks like, because then that also come into play with mental health, right? If we don't know what boundaries look like in terms of saying no or just saying I need rest, right? Because having rest also means you're being proactive. It doesn't mean that you're being lazy. It just means you're listening into yourself. So just know who you're surrounding yourself with. Just continue to follow your passions and what your beliefs are in terms of, like, like I think we all kind of can say within the, with what we were just talking about, is just move forward with in your, I guess, your authenticity, your integrity, and what you believe in. I think that's going to move you forward with greater things, right? And I think that that would go to show to the younger generations after you, to say like, hey, they're doing so much more, and that, just show up, be authentically you, make sure that your mental health, your boundaries are set in place, and just move forward with passion. I think that will really take you a long way. So I think that's what's coming up right now. So thank you for having me here.
And then coming from the, as Marianne would like to say, the tripod generation, from Meldrick and Marianne, if you have anything you would like to share to Manong Olaf, especially, 'cause this is a space within us, and also for those what tuning in, like anyone who in the 30s that needs to hear what they need to hear.
I guess 30s is not old to start. Let's start anew. Just like I agree, just keep quitting your job after your corporate job after 13 years is a really tough thing to do after you've worked so hard for what you've tried, like just to build up yourself, So yeah, it's never too late to start something new. I really commend you for starting finding your passion, being a massage therapist, tapping into your what you think is right, um yeah, I feel like you're never too old for anything, honestly, and it's better to just like tune into what you believe is what you're meant to do, Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really good at giving advice.
No, that was great. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's just, if anything, it's affirmation in terms of the journey that I've kind of, run through. And I'd like to say that I felt like, I thought like 30s was old, but when I got into it, I'm just like, this is actually the best time, because then your 20s is the time that you're actually like figuring things out, right? Like what your passions are and building your community. But once you find that in your 30s, I feel like you kind of have a pathway in terms of like, wow, this is who I am, right? And it's like living my best life in terms of figuring it out, like not caring what others really think, or and I think that's really that's why boundaries came into mind. So thank you, and I look forward to see what you all are going to be doing, and even just the next 2-3 years, because I feel like you're already making shifts and changes that we all need within our culture and in society. So thank you for that, Meldrick.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I've heard that your 20s are a lot harder than your 30s. 30s is a lot better just because you have the money. You're not really worried about what you want to do in life, So it's very good to hear that just your 30s are a lot better than your 20s, because starting your 20s is a heck of a ride.
I think it is such, at least in like, I don't know, Western society or just like America, that there has to be, an expiration date on certain things in your life. Hex no. Who said so? Because you, not really. I commend you. Wait, Manang, don't you mean ate? Shoo, you know.
Either one, because I'm part Ilocano, so Manang's okay. So
Okay.
either one's good. Yeah.
Okay, because I was just
Thank
like,
you. Thank you.
you're in your 30s? What? Shoo. Ate, how you doing? Oh my gosh. I want to commend you. Because I think like people like me, and I feel like others can say this too, that like we've internalized this culture of like there has to be an expiration date on certain things in your life, when really like that's like completely not the case. And also from Riri themselves, Miss Rihanna said like her 30s are better than her 20s. So take it from the Queen Rihanna. I am so ready for my 30s because like I'm just not ready to struggle. I just entered my 20s and I'm just the struggle, I can already see it. But I mean, that's how you get, period. Like that's how you get to your 30s, is like you gotta struggle to like have that epiphany in your 30s of like, this is it. This is it, sweetie. So yeah, I just commend you. And like I think, you know, just just hearing your story, it inspires me that like nothing is ever too late in life. I think I think there comes a certain point in your life that like if something just doesn't work out and you've invested so much time, that's like not to, I took a microeconomics class and I feel like this is so bad because I'm anti-capitalist, but just, you know, even though even though you've invested all that time into something and it still doesn't make you happy, don't keep doing it just because you've invested time, because once you've already decided that that time is already like invested, like, and you think it's a waste, obviously that's dead weight invested. So literally cut those things off and just pursue something else, because again, life, I know, period, no tampon. It's I don't know. But yeah, it's never too late. You definitely like struck a match, a fire in me. I'm just I just want to be more open-minded, you know, about the future and stuff. Like I don't, because I'm usually a person who likes to plan things because I'm so scared of uncertainty. But especially like since like the pandemic has been happening, that like that's now become more normalized, that it's okay to like not be to like be afraid of uncertainty, but just know like you don't have to be afraid, because like the future is so uncertain. And instead of like looking at it from like, you know, a pessimistic point of view like I used to, I'm trying to develop a growth mindset here, that like things can be very bright in the future no matter where I go, because I will be successful. I know myself better than anyone. And I want to say the same thing for all of y'all in this space. Y'all are going to do amazing. You know your worth. Period. Yeah.
I love that. And can I just say, I did go through like an early quarter life crisis, like turning 25, where I was like, what the hell am I doing with my life? I don't have a partner. So I also wanted to, that just reminded me, Marianne, like you both, like all of you have just such integrity within your lives already and within yourselves. Like I didn't even have that at that time. So I guess that just kind of, I thought that thought process came through, and say like, if we do get to that point, like, yeah, Marianne, like there's no such thing as an expiration date. Like what society imposes on us, it's just that, it's just a thought, right? And then we have the power within us to change that and just do whatever we want, because we have the power and capacity to do so. And I think being you know, like Filipinx and like a person of color and like, you know, of immigrant, like we have to be able to break those barriers down and say we're okay with it, right? We're making the changes not just for ourselves and also for the possible future folks, right, that are looking up, and also kind of set as an example in terms of, yes, like I can do this and that just because I have the capacity to, and not because society has imposed it on me.